Well, thanks everyone for showing up or not showing up, as the case may be. It's great to be here. This is a regular pilgrimage for me. So when Jasper said, can you come and moderate the India panel, I said yes, because it's very hard to say no to Jasper. Not many people do, but I also had to check with my assistant. Given the name of the panel, I had to check the date, and I wondered whether it was somewhere in the mid-90s. Because it seems to me that India, is something that's viewed with a bit of confusion by a lot of organisations, especially with respect to its place in Asia, and also with respect to its place in the various buckets that All That Matters covers, from sports to music to gaming and everything else. So this is a bit like alphabet soup, I think. And I think that panel is a great panel because it represents sort of past, present and future. The past is me and Neeraj. We're definitely the Jurassic Park of the panel. We've both been around for a long time. And I thought I'd ask Neeraj to set the tone. You've always been a numbers guy. We both sort of started our businesses or our place in the India world back in the mid-90s. Maybe you could just set the tone with some numbers with respect to the relevant streams that we're talking about today.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks for that, Ravi, and a very good afternoon to all of you all. Wonderful to be a part of this exciting panel on Incredible India. So, I think it's opportune that we should be doing this. This year we celebrated the 75th year of independence. And what was interesting was that there is also, along with that, a build out to the next 25 years, which was very aptly described by our Prime Minister as what is called as Amrit Kal, which is the next 25 years. And I think there couldn't be a better time to set this. So in context to the world that we are in, you're familiar with our core demographics, youngest nation, blah, 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 etc. But I think what's relevant and interesting is that there is a 750 million internet user base in the market and still growing at 7 million new consumers each month. I think every segment of and every category has seen growth. In the last 3 years, we've gone from 10 million to 80 million paying subscribers across video, as an example. There are now roughly about 350 to 400 million active streamers in the market. About a similar number as far as gaming is concerned, which is broken up into 4 different segments: bottom of the pyramid, basic sort of casual mobile gaming with some amount of real money, to coming on top, real money gaming, casino-based, fantasy and esports, and I'm sure Akshat will talk a lot about that. To other elements which are really exciting for the kind of world, and we'd encourage you all to look at India in that manner, which is something that happened about 3-4 years ago, which is the Unified Payment Interface, which is an initiative by a body called the National Payments Council of India under the Reserve Bank, which is now doing something to the tune of about 45 billion annual transactions, all through digital payments, which paves the way for a very, very exciting. So therefore, I sense the next 4-5 years, you are likely to see a market which will be about 500 million paying consumers across, and digital payments activating into digital goods. A lot of it is in our world and realm. We've started seeing a tremendous amount of capital inflow, close to about 70 odd unicorns that have been created in the last about 3.5, 4 years, almost about 45 billion which has come in. And I think the sheer policies that the government is embracing, along with the natural entrepreneurial capabilities that exist, makes it without a doubt the most exciting of the market in the world. And just one small correction to the person who introduced us. We are the second most populous nation, but not the 7th largest economy. It's now 6th largest economy, pegged to be by 2030 the 3rd largest economy in the world. So over to you.
Thanks Neeraj. We live in a world, I think, that celebrates profitless volume. I mean, the areas in which we operate, social media, etc., celebrate numbers that sometimes flatter to deceive. And India's, I think, arguably been one of those markets over the last 25, 30 years since I've been there. What are you doing to sort of address that in your areas? I mean, OML's gone from live to no live. Tell us about, how you are trying to turn your audience from sort of huge to hugely paying.
Sure. So I think if you look at India as a market, there's a study that I refer to a lot. It was done by Goldman Sachs in 2016, so a little dated but still relevant as a framework to understand India. Back then, we were 1.2 billion people. Today, we're 1.3. So the numbers won't add up, but just follow me along. So what they said is, out of the 1.2 billion people, India is actually not one country, but 3 countries. The top 200 million live, behave, and have as much disposable income as that of Mexico. So it's exactly, the GDP is the same. How much you spend on goods with disposable income, the number of houses you want to own, the number of cars you want to own, etc., the top 200 million. The second country is Indonesia. So that's the next 300 to 400 million people. Again, similar in terms of price points, in terms of disposable income, etc. And then the last 600 is sub-Saharan Africa. And that's, you have to be very clear who you're building for. The live business that we were part of was very clearly a 0.1% sort of phenomenon. Of course, Akshat's taking that now out to many more audiences, parlaying that with gaming, and that's sort of going to grow out. But for us, it was very clear that India had so much of an audience that we could reach with the content that we were making, but we needed to look outside. And now that's happening by creating regional content for India, so it goes into other markets, outside of just the English and Hindi-speaking markets within our audiences. And where we're doing a lot of work outside the country as well. In fact, most of the panelists here now have businesses outside India that address local markets outside. So Russian-speaking markets in Russia, Akshat and Gurpreet both are in the Middle East and Singapore, and these are working with local talent creators everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I would contend that within those 3 groups, there's probably so many different layers.
Yes.
I don't think they're 3 homogenous groups in itself, and you definitely have to work out who you're going for which product or which service. But in terms of your business, and one of the things that whenever I do these panels, and I do them in different places across the world, I think of the audience and what is the opportunity for them? What is the opportunity for the people who are listening to this? What would you like to see from organizations outside from a collaborative point of view for your business?
I think beyond that, it is one of the biggest internet markets worldwide, and there is a huge potential to discover and build communities beyond your current regions, and that's where not just the creators, but I think most of the biggest global labels are investing into. You have seen Warner Music set up shop in the country 2 years back, which primarily they were working via their partner agencies till now, all these years, because I think for most of the global companies in the music scene or in the creator economy, just because of these reasons about how the data is being monetized, those were the barriers for them to come here. But I think with the education and the access to the platforms over the years, you have seen a huge uptake in terms of actual revenue paying consumers, because eventually they are seeing the worth of paying those monies to consume that content. So while, yes, there are huge numbers and huge audiences, communities you can build, but definitely there's a huge potential of big revenues also being made. And as we speak today, Asia's largest YouTuber and digital creator is an Indian guy. And with the growth that you're seeing from the region, I won't be surprised in the next 2 years, the top 10 global digital creators are all Indians.
Yeah, I'm going to just come back to you, and then I'm going to come to you, Akshat. But one of the things that I'm waiting for is for Indian artists to go mainstream, to really cross over. I mean, I moved to India in 1995. I'm a big advocate for contemporary India, not just snake charmers and elephants. There's a place for snake charmers and elephants, but there's a much more diverse modern India and Indian, I think, that has an opportunity to cross over. When do you see that happening?
I think
and how do you see that happening?
I think it's already in works right now. You would have seen Badshah, who's one of the creators and a very close friend whom I've been working personally since last 10 years. He's just dropped a J Balvin song a couple of months back. And I can't announce the lineup of collabs which he's doing. And these are not collabs which are originating out of India. These are the releases which are happening at a global scale with the some of the biggest superstars reaching out to, say, for example, Badshah and start dropping these songs out. One of another client and dear friend who's unfortunately no more, Sidhu Moosewala, he has, I think, built his career over the last 2 years by doing massive crossover collabs. Beyond music, our creator called Prajakta, who is one of the leading content creator in the country, has been on a show with Michelle Obama, which has won daytime Emmy Awards. So I'm just saying the crossover has already happening. It's right now people who are willing to explore and ride on those opportunities will be able to make the best out of those.
Great. Akshat, you are right in the sweet spot. I mean, I always tell people that everything I read is that, gaming is the only space that has a chance to overtake cricket in terms of revenues, at least in terms of sports. And that's kind of mind-boggling. Where are you in that journey? When's it going to happen, and how's it going to happen?
Cricket's a little far. I said that about 3 years ago. I still maintain that. But in context, I have this 5-point framework which says how close we are. All right. Revenue is one of them. Fan base is another one. Number of people who participate is the third one. Number of people who watch is the fourth one, right? And finally is the number of other people in that ecosystem who are robust. So in cricket, teams and brands, etc. Right? We've crossed 3 of them. So we have more people who play video games in India right now than people who play cricket. We are the third most watched sport in the country of India after cricket and kabaddi, and very close to kabaddi. We just were recently on Star Sports with a partnership where we clocked between all our reach approximately 280 million as the about 20-day tournament that was watched by 280 million people. And the aha moment here is this. Every sport, and we aspire to be a sport, right? We aspire to be measured as a sport, watched as a sport, played as a sport. There was no sport on planet Earth that wasn't on television and that was big, right? And it's one of those old legacy things that you need to go ahead and cross over. For us, it's not crossing over. For us to go mainstream and to go global is not to go to another country, is to go ahead and breach this wall, which was television. Can we be on primetime television live, being watched by everyone just the way you watch cricket? We did that. And the 2 big things which we still left is team ecosystem and the revenue ecosystem. I think the revenue ecosystem is a derivative causality that comes out of everything else. But to explicitly answer your question, give me another 5 years. But in 5 years, I'll not beat cricket. I'll be the largest sports on planet Earth.
That's great to hear. So in order to get there, and I'm a great believer. I mean, I came to India in the mid-90s because I'm a great believer in its potential. I have to say that sometimes I feel it's gone forwards, backwards, laterally. I'm not sure 25 years later it's where it could have been, and that's, and there's issues endemic to the country, I think, that, that have mitigated it being a sort of linear pathway. But one of the things that really baffles me is the inability, certainly in the sports space, and Neeraj, you might have a view on this too, is for international global organisations to come and thrive. I mean, IMG was an organisation that I came with. It's not there anymore. I'd like to think that's because I'm not there anymore, but who knows. None of the other big ones in our space, Octagon, Sport 5, none of them are there. You can look at other industries, except for music, maybe, with the red label. So is this a parochial market where only local organisations can survive and thrive? Or, or what are the international organisations missing in terms of being able to collaborate and add value, where 1 + 1 = 11?
So I think I probably respond to that with first of all, an extreme dose of optimism to you, my dear friend, with a explanation to the audience that, see, when you look at India, look at it as 29 states which speak 17 different languages. And therefore, whilst there's, for 20 years I've heard this question about a crossover and why isn't an artist, because we are so busy doing things internally as well. And just the last year, crossover is actually happening between Tamil and Telugu cinema and Hindi cinema. So we're not really so worried about, sort of reaching out, because there is enough potential on that. But to your point on thriving of opportunity, I believe that there are numerous examples across industries. It's one of the most open ecosystems for participation by foreign companies to come into India. In recent times, there is a higher amount of focus on a program and initiative which is called Make in India, Skill India, etc., which is understandable given the kind of global sort of shift towards, given supply chains, the way they've been disrupted, etc. So the largeness of the country needs to also be borne in mind. And I would also remind you that just look at when you ask that question, look at a market like China and how many international companies have actually been successfully thrived out there, or have actually been asked to move out. We're a market where, Google, Facebook, all of these companies are still very much there growing. And on this point, I'll take 60 more seconds in the benefit of all of you. So there were some of us who worked for the last 3-4 years with the government in areas and categories which are relevant to us. Akshat and his team contributed to that as well. About 6 months back, the government made a very progressive move in a category called AVGC, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's an acronym for Animation, VFX, Gaming and Comics. In the last couple of months, we've added XR to it as well, which is augmented, virtual and mixed reality. And the mandate was to build a framework akin to what happened with the Indian software industry 35 years ago, which is to support and encourage growth and development. And I'm happy to say the core draft of that's already been made out. A 10-year vision is a $90 billion ecosystem emanating from that with 2 million new jobs, which, folks, friends like Akshat and his team and Gurpreet and Gunjan will all hopefully contribute to. And all of this is happening with every conceivable company from across the world which is welcome to participate, because at the end of the day, we have a saying which is called Atiti Devo Prava, which is, the guest is treated like God. So we would welcome you to look at India in that manner.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I think that's sort of the point I'm trying to get to is I really do believe that, and I get your point about India being such a big market that it's worth looking at. I mean, I spent a lot of time in the US, and frankly, that's such a big market for US companies. For them, investing in maybe Canada and London is about as far as they want to go, right? So I do understand that. I just do think that maybe there's an opportunity for all these organisations that are here that are listening to this panel to say, how do we come and be part of that ecosystem? How do we add value?
So I'm going to add something, which is that everything which is mentioned by Neeraj is important, but this is important, and this is not meant to scare people, but this has to be equitable, right? One of the easiest ways is, let's go ahead and set something in India, market's growing, let's look at going and making money from it, services, products, etc. One of the big realizations in at least the power circles or the intellectual circles is the golden straitjacket of democracy and capitalism, the way it was in the 1980s and 1990s and 2000s, won't work, right? Because it's fairly cannibalistic, right? I come to your country, I go ahead and do this, I go ahead and do a little amount of business, and then extract that wealth and go away. Now, that wealth is not necessarily profit, it's value. So if you're a Google, and if India is 10% of your value, either on a user-based system or whatever, but your value is in the NASDAQ, right? And that value is not coming to India, right? Value creation is stock value or empirical value that is being created. If that value is sitting outside India and has no way for it to be coming back to India, it doesn't matter if you're going to make 0.1% profits from the country of India, because the world market values the Indian consumer for a certain value, and that value sits in another country. And you've seen that, which is there. The Indian government had a problem, and they correctly lost when the Vodafone case happened, where a Mauritian company sold Vodafone to a British company. And India lost that case when they tried to tax it. And now look at that. Like, very equitable conversations has Google, Facebook investing into Indian companies, not just Reliance, other companies' value is coming in. They're looking at Indian consumers' value sitting in outside countries and actually deploying that into India. So if you want to be here in India, figure an equitable way where you can share the... It doesn't mean that you have to go ahead and not be in the US. Yeah. You can be in the US and in India and create equitable value, right? You can actually have more than one as a game which is there. So when you work with India, work with equitable value that you can go ahead and ascribe both to the people and to the community and the market that you're going to get out of. And yes, you'll need to believe in India, just as our government is going and doing it, and we are doing it, and my investors are doing it, that this is a 10, 20-year play.
That was my next question, and I'll ask that to you also, Gunjan. Like, one, I think it's a longer horizon still, but if you take a longer horizon, my view is the Indian consumer and the Indian market is becoming more like the rest of the world, not less, with its own nuance, of course, which it always will have. It's a great market to be a reinventor. You know, you don't need to be an inventor. I've always said, you know, migrate, modify, monetize is a great strategy for India. But Gunjan, if you, in the spirit of what Akshat said, if there were an organisation or type of organisation that you'd like to see come to India to collaborate with, what would it be?
I actually don't think there's just one. I think there's so many companies that can come to India and make a material difference, both to themselves as well as the ecosystem. Just to go back to that comparison to China, India is probably one of the fewer countries in the world that actually allows media companies to set up in the country that are 100% owned by non-Indian funds or non-Indian owners, except for news, of course. So there are opportunities. I think, just going back to what Akshat said, there needs to be equitable and fair representation. That said, if you look at the Indian consumer, globally as well, the Indian diaspora are waiting to be fed Indian content. And we're seeing that with our artists who are now traveling to perform for Indian audiences globally. We've had sold out shows in Sweden, which we were surprised by. Sold out the first show, we're like, okay, let's mount a second one. Sold out the second one, let's mount a third. And now Eastern Europe has become a big market for us. Similarly, Middle East, Africa, even LATAM, where Indian comedians are traveling to perform shows in Hindi and doing sold-out shows. So I think there is an audience globally as well that's waiting to be served that content, and you'll see that with other crossovers, for lack of a better phrase. There's an Indian musician that we work with whose music has recently been used in Miss Marvel. It's again an opportunity and a way to connect back to these audiences.
If I may just add to the point which Gunjan made, and this really, Ravi, you'll relate with this. So culturally, you know, arguably one of India's most underrated exports is our cinema, or Bollywood is described mostly outside, even though it is in 17 different languages, and Bollywood is really Hindi. But when you look at it, we produce about 1,500 films a year. They're viewed in 127 countries. They're dubbed in 35 languages. There's about 4.2 billion admission tickets that happen. Now, apart from the 1.8 billion sort of South Asian community, 1.6, 1.8 billion within the South Asian footprint, there's about 60 million South Asians who are all over the world as well. And they, as the economic interest is growing, so between, say, Germany, India, Singapore, India, Japan, India, etc., so is these elements of interest as well. And that is, one more component. And the correlation to that, Ravi, is you go back to, post-World War II. United States, the manner in which their cinema became a matter of a crossover, and Hollywood even culturally kind of set that up. I think more so in today's time, to just break barriers and create a spirit of cooperation, each of these things, whether it's the musician and artist from OML who's performing in Scandinavia to somebody watching a film, it's all pretty much happening, yeah.
Yeah, look, I think you're right, and I think one of the great things about, if you talk about the diaspora itself is not homogenous. I look at myself. My family were first generation migrants to Australia. I look at the third, fourth, second. They're very different to what I was, because their experience was different, and therefore what they're looking for is different. But that provides opportunity, because you just keep slicing. There's more texture there. Gurpreet, you were going to say something?
No, I think Gunjan, Akshat, and Neeraj has pretty much summed up. But just to add on to that, the point of Akshat, where the responsibilities of global platforms to contribute to the revenues for the country, right? I'm just saying the other part is obviously being part of the culture, right? Understanding the entire cultural dynamics of that entire ecosystem, because it's not as easy or simple as setting up a shop in some of your other countries, where just set up a franchisee or set up a few agents out there and believe the business will start growing. And that's where I think some of the global players who have come and failed are primarily not because of the lack of potential, but possibly not being able to put in the education and learn the entire cultural and the dynamics of the entire thing, right? Because I think Paul from YouTube Music mentioned it yesterday, right? That it's not just one country. It's a continent of probably 28, 29 countries with culture, languages, changing within every few kilometers within single states. And second, I think the Neeraj pretty much mentioned about how Bollywood is being dubbed into various other languages, and that means you're not just targeting Indian diaspora who is consuming that content. And Netflix, Amazon, we have a show from our talent coming up on 15th October called Mismatched on Netflix. You should watch it, because it's being dubbed in 35 over countries, not limited, not targeted. It's an Indian story, but because the potential is to reach out to the global audiences, and I'm sure these platforms are doing it because they are seeing the uptake of the Indian content being consumed beyond just the Indian audiences.
So let's talk a little bit about the consumer, or the young consumer, because that's one thing that really interests me. And we certainly in our business, we look at health and wellness as a way of galvanizing communities. We've got a lot of, especially in the gaming and whatever space, we've got a lot of youth and kids sitting down. How do you feel from a responsibility point of view in terms of promoting positive behaviour and healthy behaviour amongst the audience, because it's a real issue in a community like ours?
Well, this is the easiest question for me. I tell every parent, if their kid is playing video games for more than 4 hours a day, they're wasting time. If I run esports, I said, when is the last time you saw an athlete that was fat and unfit? Because remember, esports, and for everyone who doesn't understand esports, at the presentation to the International Olympic Committee, when it was accepted that it is a valid Olympic sport and an Asian sport, Asian level medal sport, we had to define the word sport. Yeah. And in sport, we had to go ahead and if I ask you guys what is sport, it's actually a very difficult definition to go ahead and get. We went back to the ancient Olympic text of Citius, Altius, Fortius, which is stronger, higher, faster, which defines what is sport. And eventually, esports is a speed competition. I can shoot faster than you, I can react faster than you, I can tap faster than you, I can kick a goal faster than you, I can react faster than you. And this is in milliseconds, like microseconds sometimes. So my actions are faster. And remember, this is an endurance test after that, because I got to do this for 45 minutes. So this is not just a dash. I have to go ahead and do this 57 times every 10 minutes. So when we had to go ahead and do that, we had to go ahead and we actually talked with all sports, esports athletes. They have nutritionists. They go to the gym. They're actually healthy athletes. They have to be, because if you are not, the one thing that happens when you're unhealthy is you become slower and you lose. So if you want to be that athlete who has to be that, so 1980s cricket teams versus the 2022 cricket team, right? A little more healthier, a little more fitter. There's a reason Virat was looked as one of the best fielders. You have to go ahead and be better at this. And anytime when a kid wants to go ahead and give a parent a blindside by going and saying, I'm actually practicing. I was like, you don't practice for 10 hours a day. You just don't. And you don't practice playing matches. You practice with skills. So those conversations are very easy to go ahead and have with kids. What you have to do is, like everything that is addictive, and gaming is addictive, 100%, right? So it's dopamine cycles that keep coming. So is Instagram Shorts. Or reels. Like, there's a reason why there is a certain behavior that comes out of it. So any addicting behavior, whether binge watching a series on Netflix as adults, whether it is a kid going and being on Instagram or YouTube or on video games, interactive entertainment per se is addictive. And I think we all have a responsible behavior to go ahead and set time limits for us, our families, and everyone around us.
Well, based on the numbers that you've been talking about, there's a huge ability for profit, there's a huge ability for impact. You know, and I think that for me, the question was about potential impact. I mean, I know what you're saying sounds great, but how does that permeate down? I mean, Neeraj...
There are limits, by the way. There's conscious limits now. In the top video games, you cannot play over a certain number of hours a day. You just can't. You can cheat by going and changing a Google account, or whatever. Like then we're just getting into a huge another domain of not lying on social media.
Neeraj, I think for you, because you and I are from the same era, how do you feel about that? I mean, you're at the crux of it. But we all have kids. We all have, you know, we all see it, the sort of static nature. I mean, you know, and maybe what you're saying is it's changing, but I think at the end of the day, you're always going to have the elite. Sure, they might be going to the gym and having nutritionists, but I guarantee the 16-year-old sitting in, you know, Gwalior or whatever is probably not.
I think I'll respond to that. Try and bring in the context to, you know, this session as well, and all that matters. So if I look behind, music matters, sports matters, gaming matters, marketing and Web3 matters, etc. And we're talking about an opportunity linked to all of that to a market called India. So equally, this is a market where there is something called as RTE, which is right to education. So every kid is promised a right to education all the way to what you would describe as A-level. There are numerous initiatives that have been undertaken by the government, and in context to the broader discussion on mental health, because almost all of these digital manifestations of this world of all that matters has a direct correlation to to mental health. It's encouraging to know, you know, we don't have an Obamacare kind of situation that happened and whatever, but the fact that insurance, just to cover people on insurance in the last 7 years, there has been closer to about 300 million new accounts that have been added who've directly gone in, you know, using the digital payments and UPI, etc., that I spoke about, who've been covered for insurance, which I think is a phenomenal and not enough spoken about feat, which gives access to to medical professionals, etc. Plus, I think within this realm itself, digital media itself is co-opting that. So the way, I mean, he runs one of the largest esports companies, but he's the first one to say that, you know, beyond 4 hours, you're kind of doing that. We find there is a responsibility across all our social media which is coming around. And ultimately, you've got to first create the awareness and then have a support system which kind of builds it. And the last point is, again, a very big initiative that happened, and I'm sorry I'm this champion for India because we're all proud Indians out here and wanting to do that, is telemedicine. A big thing that has been initiated. The guy who's heading it is the ex-TRAI chairman. He built the CoWIN service. We have done vaccination in the last 2 years of 2.3 billion and counting, at peak at 27 million vaccinations a day. That entire program has been built on an app, and that is also their segue into telemedicine, also bridging in all the different hospitals and governments. So there are good things happening, dude.
That's good to hear. I mean, I think, and I like the cure. I'm also a big fan of the prevention. What we're trying to do is certainly work with popular culture to address some of these issues and make it fun and entertaining. I mean, one of the things that we're trying to do at Stepathlon is to make health and fitness, which is...
No, I think so. So my buddy here, Stepathlon is a platform which you folks should all check out, and he's been one of those champions at this because he's been introducing this. We participated in a program which I think was done about 7-8 years back, which is just, you got to do those 10,000 steps. And that was an initiative done across corporates. And obviously, you've kind of built this into a much, much bigger global platform.
Well, now we're trying to do it with popular culture. And I think popular culture is the way to change the world. I always say if a 60-year-old dentist shows you how to brush your teeth, that's one thing, but if your favourite Bollywood actress or influencer shows you might pay a bit more attention. And you guys all work in popular culture, and I think, again, we very much believe in triple bottom line, and I think I'll certainly be annoying all of you in the coming weeks to see how we can maybe combine to impact the planet, not just from a profit point of view, but from a health and fitness point of view. But any last words for each of you quickly? We've got a couple of minutes. Anything you want to share with the audience in terms of anything you want? Gunjan, why don't you go first?
I'd prefer to go last, sorry. I haven't really put my thoughts together.
No, I'll just add on to the point of the mental wellness, right? Because we work with content creators, influencers who are very young, right? As young as people who are starting off, 12, 13 years old, right? People who might not have experienced life, but have experienced a lot of life on social media, right? So their expectations and their access to the, there's other byproduct of the toxic element that we talk about in social media, right? So as a part, because we are not in the business of selling products or commodities, we are in the business of building human beings as superstars, right? A large part of the bandwidth goes into ensuring we keep the mental sanity at the right point. Even though they're influencers, they're supposed to spend a large part on social media. But just like Akshat said, we ensure, just like principals, teachers, we check their screen times, right? Because your work can be done in few hours, but the rest is just consuming content. Some of the influencers, we have made rules internally where they are barred to get and access feedback or read comments from certain areas, which is done by the tools developed by us, so that they don't have to go and emotionally get affected. The third party, the AI, goes and studies all of that and gives them the right feedback which they still need. And of course, and we'd love to discuss with you how we can work with you and build, bring your tools to some of the talent that we are working with.
Right. Akshat?
No, go back to what we talked about at the start. Like, this is still called Incredible India, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what is incredible about this country. We all very privileged, 1% of the 1%, we get to travel across the world to go out and look at. This insane sense of hope in the youth that I go out and see, and I use these words very, very clearly, insane sense of hope that we have in our youth today, which is, A, we have problems. Life sucks so bad for friends, for sub-Saharan India. We know it. This is not hidden. Second, we can solve it, right? Yeah, it's a great problem. It's our problem. And we have the means, the YouTube, content, people, support structures, ambitions, education, RTE, right to food, and Rega. Like, you've got some of those Maslow's theories solved. That I'll get food if I need to. I'll get work if I have to. I'll get education if I have to. But I can solve problems. And guess what? Solving the problems actually is value creative for the world, right? There's a reason our economy is still doing well. Is we have loads of problems to solve and the willingness to do it and the hope to dream that we can actually do great with it, right? Without that, India is not incredible.
Very good point. Very good point.
I'll just like to cite an example here for a talent again, Sidhu Moosewala, and I'll keep talking about him for the rest of the year and years to come because in his memory. But he's a guy who's based out of a remote village called Musa in Punjab, right? And he grew up with the dream of watching all the hip-hop guys, Tupac, and wanted to be on the Billboard charts. He never cared about, honestly, Indian charts. We did few projects with him last year, and he never called me up that if my music video is being played on MTV or any radio station in India, what are the local radio charts? He just said, is my data being ingested that my tracks will come on Billboard? Right? And when he's talking about Billboard, he's not talking about the Billboard India charts.
Yes.
And that was his dream, and that guy is the possibly first Indian artist to have probably a dozen of tracks on Billboard charts, Billboard Canada, Billboard UK, and Billboard Global charts out there. And like Akshat said, that's a dream and passion, and he made it work.
I see. Gunjan, I know we're going over time, but it's hard to get India into 40 minutes, so quickly just...
Sure. I think just to speak to what Akshat and Gurpreet mentioned, India's at a really interesting time. We're just about reaching escape velocity, just about getting out of what's held us back in the past, everything from our infrastructure to the digital systems that are getting implemented. It's a really great time for Indian creators abroad as well as for international companies to look at India as an opportunity.
Neeraj, last word for the voice of experience.
Welcome to India.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.